been some recent sensationalized headlines in the French news about American retirees moving to France and getting on the public healthcare system without ever having contributed to the French Social Security apparatus. When we moved here, we did not move here as retirees, but I was told from several sources that merely living in France for 3 months qualified or made you eligible to get a carte vitale, the public, as you know, the public health care card. So I don't think it was a uniform rule, or maybe there was some confusion between different CPAM offices depending on where you were. I've seen some things that it's kind of a gray area in French law. But anyway, to the extent there was a loophole or a gray area, the French government is now moving to close that loophole and ensure that any retirees moving here from America or any other G20 country don't don't get into the public healthcare system or are not eligible for it without having pay into the Social Security system. Anyway, I thought this would be a good jumping off point to look at why and what type of Americans do move to France. France is consistently the #1 touristed country in the world. Americans, like everyone else, love French culture, French architecture, French food and wine. That being said, France is never #1 or even in the top 5 countries for Americans to move to. The only real news that Americans get of events in France is when there's a terrorist attack or riots. And like I said, a lot of these things are more perceptions or distorted perceptions than reality. The places that get the most buzz in the U.S. as sort of perfect retirement places, the one I most often hear is Portugal. Also hear about people wanting to move to Croatia, Spain. Central and South American countries are really popular with retirees. Southeast Asian countries are also popular. These are the countries or regions that I hear most about from Americans saying that Americans who might want to move after retiring, that's where they typically say they want to go. American retirees tend to seek out warm weather, especially if there's beaches involved, and low cost of living. Canada and Mexico are also popular. Probably a lot of that has to do with their sharing a border with the U.S., making it easy for American retirees to cross back and see loved ones. So I would add to that list of factors, I'd mentioned warm weather and low cost of living, but also important are political stability, proximity to the U.S., and a familiar language. So who are the Americans that move to France? And I gotta tell you right off the bat, for a lot of Americans, they pretty much equate Paris with France, and we still have to let our friends and family in the U.S. remind them that no, we don't live in Paris. Also, I need to interject here, and these are completely unprofessional and barely researched categories. Oh, there goes our dog alarm. Anyway, I don't know if you heard that in the background. Yeah, so anyway, here we go. But having spoken to various people we've met along the way, and having watched countless videos of American expats living in France, or other places, quite frankly, these are kind of the categories that I've come up with. The first type are young and adventurous Americans. Sometimes they arrive here as students and fall in love with the country and want to stay longer. It's not easy for them though, because France doesn't have a digital nomad visa, and there's no really a clear path to a long stay visa for them. But they often, I don't know about often, but they do, some of them do persevere. And of course, when you're young and single, it's a lot easier to kind of take those risks that you wouldn't be able to do once you're older or have a family. Another type of American that moves to France is perhaps the ones we most often encounter, and perhaps that's partly influenced by the fact that we live in Grenoble, which has been referred to as the Silicon Valley of France. There's a lot of engineering and research companies based here. It's also an educational hub with the University of Grenoble Alps. These are people who have been either relocated here by their company or have been recruited by a company here for their special expertise. Because these Americans typically earn less in France than they would in the US, they also do it for the adventure and the cultural experience. And often they have children and they want them to do it as part of their children's personal development, learning a new language and a new culture. Another type of immigrant I'd call are American retirees. I actually haven't met any of those yet, but I have seen YouTube videos of Americans retiring to France, as usually it's a long-held dream of them, and they're Francophiles who really love French culture. I think that they tend to be attracted to places like in southwestern or southeastern France, warmer climate, Mediterranean, that sort of a thing. Typically, these types of retirees are going to be have a little more wealth than the average American retiree, just because of the costs involved in moving, and they're going to be paying higher taxes and so forth and so on. And I think typically to have a real appreciation of French culture, or those who are really into it are going to be a little more highly educated. Now, I'm skeptical that any retiree would move to France as a primary motivation would to get on the public healthcare system. And a big part of that is, although you may have heard what a complete disaster Americans' healthcare system is, it's so highly privatized and so many people are uninsured. One of the few groups that actually benefit from public health care in the US that operates much like the French system are retirees. And retirees automatically qualify for that health care at the age of 65. And on top of that, so I don't want to get into too much into the weeds of it, but for cost, they do have to pay $200 a month to stay on that healthcare system to get the full benefit of it. But so to me, it seems unlikely that they would move here, that a primary motive would be to get on a French healthcare system, as I think as a few politicians have tried to sort of sensationalize the issue. I should also say, that these different types that move to France, different types of Americans. It's not there's a blend. They overlap. These are not clear-cut, separated sort of categories. And with that said, another type would be those who have an existing tie to France. For example, either a romantic interest in France, or they have relatives in France. They may only be one generation or so removed from France, that sort of thing. Another category, and this is probably the most blended category, probably overlaps with all the other categories. I'm going to call these midlife career adventurers. Typically, in their highest earning years, they are willing to take a pay cut or sacrifice career advancement in exchange for adventure and a change of scenery. I'll include in this group those who have children and want to enrich their children's cultural and personal development. And for my last and final type of American that moves to France, I'll call these societal value emigres. They are people who are fed up with the American prioritization of individualism and materialism and seek a society where there's more emphasis on community values. They might also be horrified by the sort of sharp turn to the right that American politics have taken, and not necessarily even just the right, but sort of the whole Trumpism type of atmosphere that's going on in the U.S. right now. So, yeah, that's pretty much rounds out my categories. Now, for the question you probably were all wondering, what category do I and my family and I, which one do we fit into? And as you probably guessed, we're a blend. We're a blend. But I would say, first and foremost, the midlife/career adventurer category, with a heavy emphasis on wanting to improve the personal and cultural development of our two sons, who at the time were 11 and 14. Was it 11 or 14? Yeah, 11 and 14 years of age when we came over. We also had some real concerns about the safety of our children back in the U.S. We also had an advantage that most Americans don't have. My father was a European national, and as a result, I and our sons had EU citizenship. After doing extensive research, everything from education to recreation to cost of living to employment opportunities, we chose Grenoble, France. But one thing I can say with a fair bit of confidence is that the Americans that are coming to France are not economic refugees or healthcare refugees. In fact, I think that France is probably getting the cream of the crop. Don't want to sound too, I hope I'm not blowing my own horn, but I think that most Americans that are coming to France are the more educated ones, and are the ones that have more financial means or expertise in various fields. Yes, and I absolutely agree that it is important for us American expats to learn the language. Not easy, I personally attest to that. And learn the culture and integrate into the French culture.